Very good. So, I will do a quick intro, right? That's my role now. So it's a very, very, very special episode. I think it's the 24th episode of Raw Voices. And for the very first time, I am on my own. Tim is not with me. So just to give a very short summary of what's happening, Tim has some personal issues, and actually he wrote a blog post about it. If you go to his very famous blog, A Daring Adventure, he just posted it, and it's the title of his post is Life Sucks. And that's very funny for a life coach to say that, but this is basically what it's all about. So I won't say too much about what's happening for Tim. I just would like to tell him that I love you, man, really sincerely, and I think about you recording this podcast. But with me, I'm very happy because I have Dr. Orin Davis, a PhD. You have a PhD, my friend, right, Orin?
Yes.
A PhD. So I think you're the most intelligent man that we had on this show, I think, because nobody had a PhD, I believe, from all the different guests that we had. So that's a first for us. And I'm very happy that you are here because you have this PhD on the positive organizational psychology. Is it correct?
Yes.
Right. And positive psychology is something which I actually really love. And to be honest, I've just discovered its existence 6 months ago. I didn't know anything about positive psychology. And I'm a certified coach as well. So, see, I'm very bad, I think. But you're also a consultant, and
yes.
you work at QL. Is it QL Lab, Quality of Life Laboratory, something like that?
Yes.
Right. And I believe that you make the workplace a better place. Something like that's your tagline. No?
We make workplaces great places to work.
Great places to work. Okay. And you define yourself actually as a self-actualization engineer, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this title, self-actualization engineer? What does it mean?
So basically, it's about enabling people to do and be their best. But I sort of think of myself, and I say this in jest, as a human engineer. I have a background actually in the hard sciences, and then I moved over to people sciences. And there's just this engineering background. I work with a lot of engineers. I hang out with a lot of engineers. And it just sort of rubbed off. And I saw it as sort of engineering people's self-actualization. Since I'm coaching people, since I'm coaching companies, I'm working with people to help them develop. And even when I'm working with a company and developing a company culture, increasing diversity, something along those lines, there's still a lot of individual coaching that needs to happen. So I'm still engineering people's abilities to do and be their best, and that's self-actualization engineer.
It sounds to me, because I'm a coach as well, I'm coaching people, and when you say engineer, right, it's almost very methodical, right? It's almost like you follow a process, and I work a lot with engineers myself. And to me, the coaching process is very organic. You see, it's very messy. You can dance in the moment, and stuff like this. So when you say self-actualization engineer, so kind of engineering people to be better, if I understand correctly, or find a way to be better, how does it work really? What do you do? What is the process really that you apply?
So there's no single process that you can use. As you say, it's dancing in the moment, but among many other things, you're using appreciative inquiry. You're trying to find out what works well for people, how they do their best. what they really want. And I think that getting to know people at their best and where they want to go from there, and most of the questions that I'm asking in that process are usually focused on one of those two things, because that gives you an idea of where they are and where they want to be, and that is what helps you enable them to change, and then find the path to change, find where the obstacles are, find where the road's smooth, find where they really need to go, what can catalyze the change. This is something I talked about in my TEDx talk on helping yourself to self-help, is that we need to reverse engineer the possibilities. So in many cases, I'm helping them find the catalyst that helps them get to a change point. And that's as true when I'm working with management employee relationships as I am coaching individuals.
Actually, I would like to get back to this TEDx talk, because this is how I discovered you, right? And I really loved this talk. I really loved the message behind it, because it's about, you started by advices. You project on the screen all this list of advices, and you say, this is very generic. You read all these advices, and we see this more and more. Every time that I open my Facebook account, I can see all these advices, all these posters. This is what you should do. This is what you should do. And basically, on this message that you have on YouTube is, it might not work for you, right? It's something which is so generic, and you are special. You are unique as an individual, and it's not that easy to apply this advice. Am I correct to say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, usually when you're reading advice that you find on the internet, this is written by somebody who has no idea who you are.
So and you come with this idea of reverse engineer the advice. How can you do that? How can you do this?
So what I'd say in general is you got to figure out what the advice is really trying to get you to, or how this advice works. In some cases, the advice is a process. So I'll give you one of my favorite examples of reverse engineering advice. If you've ever read David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, so that is great advice, and it's a great book if you're David Allen. And what David Allen is doing is he's sharing with you how he does things. And the point is, he's not telling you, do it all my way, because you're not David Allen. What he's really telling you is, take a look at how I do this system, and you'll find that if you can create some personalized analog of this system, you'll get more done. And what you're paying David Allen for when you buy his book or listen to his advice or attend his lectures is that he's giving you basically the framework for how to build your organizational system.
Right.
But if you take it as you got to do it exactly the way David Allen does, that's the problem that people run into. People start trying to do exactly what David Allen does, and they're not David Allen. Right.
But is it something like, because for me, giving advice is mentoring, really, right? Or isn't it? Because for me, the difference between coaching and mentoring, a mentor will give you the advices, because the guy is an expert and will tell you what to do, how you do it, right? And this is for me one of the limitations of mentoring is, you may be an expert in your field and you have 25 or 30 years experience, but you are you, right? Something that has worked for you and you may have been successful may sometimes a little bit difficult for somebody else to apply, and you may get to the same point but using a different method. Is it something like this,
So there are two ways to think of this. One is that you're giving somebody a process that they reverse engineer to their own lives and circumstances. The other can be that they already have the advice, or they already have the goal or process, but they don't know how to use it in their own lives. And so what you're helping them do then in the reverse engineering process is you're helping them find the catalyst. You're helping them find a way to do what they want to do. They already know what they want to do. They just don't know how to make that happen.
So, but now the question is, can they do it themselves, right? Can somebody like, okay, I received this advice from, I don't know, a big guru, and you tell me, okay, find what it means, for you. Don't follow exactly what the guy did. Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough to do this myself? Do you see what I mean?
Often we are actually more than capable of doing it, provided that we're willing to sit and think about it, and we're actually willing to personalize the information we get. I mean, the biggest problem is it's not so much that we can as much as we don't.
But and for me, the power of advice is now, because I've been trained on coaching myself. I found it almost secondary. You know, I don't know if you agree with me, but it's almost as if the power of questioning, not telling someone what to do, but just, you know, make the people realize what is the right way, is much more powerful and practical, and the person will follow through, right? So do you find this yourself, you know, when you're applying your coaching skills? Or
I do find that it is better for people to discover things themselves, but sometimes you really can give them a hand or an answer or something along those lines. It depends, because in some cases there are places that people may be scared to go in their experiences, and so in some cases giving them that answer is a push in that direction. It's telling them to go there.
That's very interesting. If I can interrupt
Sure.
you, because this is very interesting, and this is a debate that I have with my good friend Tim, my co-host, because for him, he doesn't hesitate during his coaching to give advice, to tell somebody what to do, right? To say, okay, you know what, maybe you should do that, right? And for me, this is something that I don't do. And actually, for me, if one way to see a bad coach, and that's my take on it, is somebody that will tell you what to do, will give you always advices, right? And if that's, if you have a coach like this, I would advise to fire him straight away, because this is not what coaching is about. But for me, I'm just preventing myself. I've just forbidden myself to give any advice to anybody, and I will just, ask this question again and again and again. But what you say is you would sometimes give a solution or give an advice to push the person in the right direction, right?
Yes, sometimes it's a place that they just need a little boost going to, and so giving them that advice is almost giving them permission to try on that idea. Or sometimes it's an idea that they want to try on, but they're not sure they're able to, or they're not sure that they're ready. And so by confronting them with that idea directly, you're able to get them over that hump. Although, and this is where I would kind of agree with you on the be careful about giving advice. One of my intellectual idols is Milton Erickson. He was a psychiatrist who passed away in 1982. But one of the things that he used to teach all of his students was that he lets his patients, and he was a psychiatrist, so patients, he let his patients tell him what they needed. But sometimes what they need is for you to give them advice.
That's true. That's true.
But let them tell you that. And in some cases, they're not going to do it directly, of course. But let them tell you what they need. And if they really do need this sort of thing, then that's okay, and you can give it to them. But they've basically given you permission to do that, rather than you necessarily imposing your advice on a client.
Yeah, true. Very true. Can I ask you, just to move a little bit on positive organizational psychology, right?
Sure.
And makes this workplace great places to work, right? Mm-hmm. And it's something that passionates me, this new trend. And I've repeated it several times on this podcast. Is I work for a big company, it's a giant company, and I won't name it, but it's one of the major company out there. And believe me, the model of management that we apply is everything except positive organization psychology principle or processes, right? We don't talk about emotions at all. We don't talk about feelings. We just talk about ROI, KPIs, and reaching the objectives and the goals, and that's it, right? And this is, I guess, the traditional way that always has been, right? And I'm a bit curious over there, because this is my everyday life at work. This is how it goes. But do you see a trend now? Do you see a change and these ideas, what these positive psychology principles, are coming, filtering in the workplaces? Do you see this happening?
Only in a few places, and usually when I do, I'm seeing it more as, so to speak, the latest management fad rather than, a serious culture change. I mean, you can contrast this with, let's say, Zappos and companies like that, where they really are trying to take this seriously.
Right.
But many companies are trying to give lip service to it. But I mean, this is true almost everywhere. You see this in almost every type of organization. People giving lip service to something positive, and then just going right back to business as usual. I mean, this is true for almost any kind of change. I mean, you've probably seen this with clients as a coach. You've probably seen this, with just about every form of, let's say, social justice or social change or institutional change, politics. It's all about giving lip service to something different, and then everything stays the same.
Right. So, like listening to you, it seems that we have no hope to change things. Is it is it like this?
No, not at all. There's plenty of room and plenty of hope to change things. The difference is people actually have to take it seriously. This can't just be a management fad, and this is something I've discussed with people as a diversity consultant. When I say that I'm going to go in there and improve diversity, what I talk about is what I call sustainable diversity. It's not just giving lip service to, oh yes, we're going to change the demographics of our organization. It's changing your culture. It's changing something at a much more fundamental level.
Right.
And you were saying that there's a huge focus on ROI and KPI. What I would tell companies if I were to go in there is I would say, don't stop looking at ROI and KPI. As a matter of fact, what I would say is make sure you're focusing on ROI and KPI, but also don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Because if you're looking at just short-term ROIs, and that's usually the problem, is companies are looking at a short-term ROI or, the KPI, but measured over a very short period of time. Even 3 months, I would say, in business is still too short of a period of time to measure this stuff. And when you're looking at the effects of positive psychology, some people really are thinking, well, I want to bring positive psychology to my organization, and I expect an immediate ROI of 20%, and I tell people that's just not reasonable.
Okay. So actually, can we go back to the definition of positive psychology in the organization? Sure. What is it? What is it if you have to define it?
So I jokingly call positive psychology the science of what works. And when it comes into organizations, we're basically talking about what makes an organization flourish. Now, flourishing in an organization is not just about the financial indicators, it's also about the value that it provides. I mean, if a company is making a lot of profit, but it's also not doing that honestly, or it's doing that, by making people miserable, that's not quite the same thing as a company that is making a lot of profit by providing valuable products and services that people need, and they do it in a positive and sustainable way. So
I totally agree with you. Although my experience is most of the time, the objective is the money. This is what it is. It's all about that. Right. And obviously, we try to be green, we try to be ecological and ethical because this is what it is. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is the priority, right? Mm-hmm. And is it what you see when you do your consulting work, or is it different?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, the bottom line is money. But the thing that most people are missing when I do, and I see this a lot when I'm consulting to companies, the first thing I've got to get their minds off of is that short-term bottom line. You got to get your mind off of that. Unfortunately, many stakeholders are looking for fast profit.
Right.
And basically, you got to get out of the mindset of the fast profit, and that's what's usually the ruination of almost any organization, is wanting instant, high-quality results and high quality is almost never done in an instant, and that's the trouble that they run into. So if you're going to try and make a workplace a great place to work, the first thing you've got to do is understand that you're going to slow your growth a little bit in the short term to reset the infrastructure to make more explosive growth. And if you're too focused on, getting your next quarter numbers out there, you're just not thinking long term enough for any kind of intervention to take place. And, so many consulting firms do things that don't work, partly because they're heavily focused on short-term returns.
Right. But have you seen, like during your consultancy, have you managed to change the mindset of some of the managers, of the CEOs, and to say, look, try this long-term approach, and you'll see you'll be much more successful. You'll have much more ROI, and your KPIs will be all green, just like you like. Have you managed to convince the people?
Mostly, they don't really want to hear that. What I've been finding with a lot of clients, and I admit I turn those clients down, is that they want some kind of very fast change. They basically want me to go in, wave my positive psychology wand, and make a very fast change. And when they find out that that's not what it's going to be, they back off and find somebody who can help them pretend that that's what they're going to be able to do.
I like that. And pretend that you can change a culture like this, which is really that, And I like the message that you just said before, which is it's about making money, but also you have a responsibility as an organization, as a company, to do good around you, I think, and to be ethical and to be careful and to bring values not only to your shareholders, but to your employees and to your customer and to everyone else, including the planet, I guess, and to be responsible. And I think this message resonates so much now to everyone, because suddenly we are all connected and we see the stuff now, and we say, this American dream, or the way to climb the ladder. Maybe this is there's something more to that. It's not only about the money; it's about what are we trying to achieve here. Right, so but I would like to believe, that we have this change of culture happening, and I was hoping because you are over there and consulting, that you have this, at least the seed that are planted, and you see like new organization implementing these new changes, but it looks like it's not the case. Am I wrong?
It's often not just yet, but what I would say is the way in which the seed is getting planted is organizations are still thinking about this now. And again, it's still slow change, because just as we say that there's slow change in organization, there's also necessarily going to be slow change in people's ability to recognize the value of this. So people are starting to understand that what positive psychology has to offer the organization is really, really good, and that they can see that this is stuff that is likely to make money in the long term, but at this point in time, people don't want to necessarily take that long-term risk or put in the long-term investment,
right?
Unless they can do some kind of, CYA management or decision-making in which they can say, well, this is a company that's done a lot of changing. I see this a lot with some of the bigger consulting firms, that they'll hire the bigger consulting firms, even though those consulting firms sometimes don't know what they're doing. I mean, most of the big consulting firms, they have some very specific specialties at which they are really, really good. And then they've got other things where, they'll do it for you, they'll take your money, but they're really not so good at that.
Okay. So let me submit you a case, right? A case study. Imagine I'm a big CEO, right?
All right.
And I really believe in you, right? Orin, you're my guy. I want you to change my company and implement all your ideas, in my company, right? And you have carte blanche, means that you have all your free hand to do everything what you want to do to implement this. What will be this perfect workplace for you? What would be the changes that you would implement?
So the first thing I'm starting with is the vision of the company. So I'm going to the top.
Right.
I'm talking to the CEO, and my first general question to the CEO is, what is your value proposition? How do you create value for the people that consume your product or your service, the people that are going to pay you and your company for what you do? What value do they get?
Right.
And that's where we start. That's the vision of the company. That explains the meaning of what this company does. And I'm pretty emphatic about bringing meaning to the company.
Right.
So
right.
we're talking about how this company makes everybody's lives better in some way or another. And that's a vision that people can communicate all the way from the top, all the way down through the company. And almost every company that you can name has the potential to create a meaningful vision like that.
Right.
Whatever it is. So you start there. It's got to be a vision that employees can buy into. So another thing you want to do is run that vision up the flagpole, make sure that everybody salutes. And you want to make sure that people understand the meaning of what they do, because it's one thing to be sitting there, in the grind doing coding and data analytics or whatever other tedious tasks that need to be done, but then to be able to step back from those tedious tasks and be able to assign meaning to those tasks and say, what I do enables people to live better lives, to experience more value in their lives, is a really fantastic thing. And so you want to be able to communicate that through the organization from the top all the way to the bottom. That's the first thing. The second thing I'm looking for is how the company approaches its hiring, its talent management, because you want to make sure that the company is going to provide value to its employees in the same way that employees provide value to the company. So the company needs to see this as an exchange of value, that the employee comes in, does things, uses a specific skill set that he or she brings in, and then the company is going to use that skill set to create value. But in the process, the individual also needs to receive value from the company, and that value is a compensation package. So it's not just salary, but it's salary, it's experience, it's personal growth, professional growth, skill development, any number of other things. And, when you've got a good human resources department, they're actually looking at all of those things, the specific personal development of the employees. And that's really what HR is supposed to be about, getting people to do their best on the job.
Right.
Trying to create limited hardcore policies. Generally speaking, policy was written because somebody was an idiot. So you really don't want to have a lot of policy. You want to give employees the freedom to do what they do best. This is something we call theory Y management, letting people be motivated to do what they're doing. I mean, look, if people were just there for the money, that's fine. And I can think of a situation, for example, where somebody comes into a company that's just their day job, but what they really want to do is something that they practice at night. Okay, fine, I understand that. So you come in, you put in your 40 hours or your 36 or whatever it is, and you go and do your thing. And I understand, with my employees, I have an understanding then, if I'm the manager, that this job, that the way in which this job is providing value to the employee is that this job is funding his or her other endeavors. And that's fine. I mean, at this point, company loyalty is a thing of the past, and so is employee loyalty. People are coming for short terms. We're almost all consultants these days, whether we see it that way or not. This is an idea that Liz Ryan points out in Human Workplace, among many other sources, that we're all independent contractors now.
That's true, actually. That's true, and I can see this happening. But and I don't know if it's a good thing, to be honest, by the way, but this is what it is. Suddenly you are replaceable, and all your seniority or whatever you have provided in the past, you have always to put it back again on the table. And one question that I have actually is, what do you think about performance management, or these annual appraisals that all the companies are doing, basically, of rating their employees? Do you think it's this method, that these yearly reviews to go, did you do your objective, and to say, well, you're good, you're bad, you need some development? What do you think about this appraisals review, or if you have any thoughts about it, by the way?
Sure. So, funnily enough, building on this case study, annual appraisals are probably one of the first things that are gonna have to go. You don't want that. I mean, plain and simple, you just don't want that. What you want is a constant level of feedback between management and employees. I mean, why should you wait a year to find out that you've been doing a good job or bad job or any other thing? Employees should be getting consistent feedback. And they should know what they're doing well. They should know what they need to work on. And by the way, this is another thing that I see a lot in companies that I just still can't believe is, companies spending a lot of time focusing on people's weak points and the things that they need to shore up. Right. And it's kind of like, I really just want to tell managers, you don't hire your employees for their weaknesses. You don't hire employees for the things they do badly. You hire employees for the things they do well. Why not spend time making sure that they do their best work better?
I'm so with you. I'm so with you on this.
So this is the kind of thing, and also my concept of hiring and firing, which is something that I found is kind of foreign to a lot of companies, but this is advice I give very, very consistently, is firing an employee should be followed by one of two things. If you're not about to give the employee a lawsuit or arrest them, don't fire them. Okay. Any other problems you're having are either discussions you need to have with the employee or changes you need to make in your hiring process. Because I hear people, I hear stories, for example, about people getting fired for quote-unquote insubordination, and you look into the situation and you find out that basically the boss was demanding something ridiculous and the employee just decided not to do that, and next thing you know, the employee is terminated and the company loses a perfectly good, logical, reasonable, talented individual. And it's kind of like, why is this happening? Like, you don't want to fire an employee for insubordination. The first thing you want to do is find out why the employee is being insubordinate. I mean, don't get me wrong. If an employee is being egregiously insubordinate, I would point out that you could almost argue that that's breach of contract and practically grounds for a lawsuit. So there, once again, I'm saying you don't fire an employee unless you're prepared to sue them or arrest them.
No, and I agree, because this is part actually of diversity, right? What you don't want, I believe, is everyone to obey blindly and not, question the status quo, to say why are we doing this? Maybe there's a better way, and to question, what's happening in the organization. And I value this feedback, but we need to be ready to accept this feedback, like a different voice. And what I found out is this ability to speak. Sometimes it's shut down, and it depends really about the culture of the companies. In some companies, I guess the Googles, you like the robots and people that can check a little bit what the orders in order to come with these brilliant ideas. But most of the time, I guess people would just shut up and just obey, and even if they don't agree about that, right? But what
Absolutely.
You describe, yeah.
And funnily enough, continuing on your case study question, along that vein, is that you absolutely need communication systems in place so that your top management and your C-suite is actually being able to listen to the frontline employees. And I find that, the overwhelming majority of the time, the solutions that a company needs are in the possession of your employees already. And I find that a lot of what I'm doing as a consultant is actually just greasing the wheels of those communication lines and going in and talking to people. And it's amazing what frontline employees know. And a lot of people are not comfortable or afraid of going up to the chain of command. But it's unbelievable, especially because the frontline employees, the reason why they're called the frontline employees is that they're right at the interface of your company and your clients. And they are seeing things that, as a CEO, you're removed from that, and the C-suite is generally removed from that. And so these frontline employees can tell you exactly what's going on, the responses that they're getting, things like, I don't like this. And one other thing I see is that, they're shooting the messenger. You get a lot of that too, is the employees will say things like, clients don't like this, and they'll take that out on the employee. And again, that's not going to be very useful. It's most important about growth and change and communication. So a positive organization has growth, it has change, and it has communication, and especially an open line of communication throughout the company. It doesn't matter who you are. If you are the janitor of the company who only works overnight, you still should be able to knock on the CEO's door, at least, at an appointed time, otherwise too many interruptions and things like that. But, the CEO should basically be having, for lack of a better term, open office hours where, like, I'm just here. If people want to drop by. Or, like, I'm just going to post slots so that people can come talk to me, at specific times. And that, even the janitors whose work may be pretty far removed from the C-suite should still be able to pretty much get a walk-in and a sit-down with the CEO.
Absolutely. All the voices of the organization counts, actually, and all the ideas counts. But to create this culture of exchange, and what you describe when you say communication is true communication, right? It's not about this communication and the employees will tell whatever management wants to hear because just to look good, or to kind of out of fear distort the message and the reality of things, and to have this honest two-way communication, it's not that easy, I think, to implement, So have you found this in reality, this two-way honest communication?
It's hard to implement, especially because there's a lot of fear. So part of what I have to do when I'm consulting is help people get over this culture of fear and create safety for employees to finally learn and to create a system where you can communicate without getting fired or without fear of reprisal. And the number one thing that you really need to build in these sorts of things is your system for how you deal with screw-ups and how you deal with failure. And I gotta exclude what I'm about to say. I gotta exclude all the stuff that violates any laws. I mean, that's a different ballgame. Okay. When you're breaking the law, when you're doing things that you should be sued for, arrested for, whatever else. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about screwing things up or messing things up.
Right.
Or even in terms of communication, people say things that are insensitive sometimes. Like, people make mistakes on this, and part of it is that there needs to be some room for respect, some room for the humanity of people, some room for giving people the opportunity to correct their mistakes, to clean up the mess, to see what can be done, to straighten things out. And one of the most important things is that people need to be given the opportunity to do that. Right. Because most of the time people are not screwing up intentionally, and people are not being explicitly negligent or any number of other things along those lines. What they're doing is they're trying to do their best. They haven't necessarily seen every factor. They haven't thought everything through, and so consequently they've made some kind of error. But in that case, the idea is to point out the error. I mean, do it as gently as possible, but point out the error. Indicate where that's coming from. See what their solution is. Sit down with people and say, okay, we've got a problem. Let's not worry about assigning blame or assigning fault, but we've got a problem. You've been involved in this problem somewhere. How do we fix this? There's too much emphasis on who's to blame, who's responsible, and who has to what, and not enough on we've got a problem that needs fixing. Let's get this done.
Absolutely. And this blaming culture, or not even recognize failure, it's another thing that I found amazing. It's this almost perfect picture, when the CEOs or, managers will show this PowerPoint presentation, and all the graphs will go on the right way, on the right direction, and everything is green, everything is perfect. And reality of this is there's this tree that hides a forest of misery sometimes, and screw-ups and failures, and we don't recognize that. We hide that. We it seems like we're all perfect, but this is not the reality. And I like all, someone like Richard Branson from Virgin, who admits his failures, that he learned so much about his failures and from his, screw ups, and that's a way to grow. And it's amazing in the organization that we cannot admit that we can fail, but we need always to win. We need always to succeed. Don't get me wrong. This is what we need to succeed. But success, sometimes we need to go through failure sometimes in order to learn things, right? So what do you think about that?
So I often hear about this fail fast, fail often sort of mantra that, once again, is lip service to a concept. But the fact is that failure hurts, and we don't like failure. Failure stings, and even though we can learn from failure, we can benefit from failure, we also lose from failure.
Sure.
And absolutely. for us that can be very rough, and we have to announce those losses if we fail, and that there's always this fear of one-shot reprisal, that if we fail once, our investors will lose confidence and put their money in a company that does not appear ever to have failed. I'll give you my favorite example on this, funnily enough, is in hiring. That if you've ever been fired from a job, that actually is a strike on your record. But when you stop and think about it, I think that people who have been terminated from a job at least once are people that have got a lot more experience, who know a lot more about the workplace, who have learned a lot more about themselves, who have had a much better opportunity to correct their mistakes. You almost want to find somebody who has been fired once before. They may turn out to be better employees than people who have never been fired.
I've never thought about that. Damn, I will do this, Orin. Okay, you convinced me. I will just hire people who have been fired. That's it.
Well, I'll also point out that some of the most talented people are also some of the ones most likely to get fired. Because your most talented people are the ones who are very likely to violate your company policy. They're not likely to tolerate some of the nonsense that goes on in a company. They really want to be successful. They really want to do well. And the whole point of their being talented is that they don't fit inside the normal boxes.
Absolutely.
And so they're most likely to violate some kind of policy that's going to get them fired, or they're most likely to do something that might actually get them fired. I think of one funny example that I happen to know, and in this case, the employee did not get fired. This is what I call one very smart manager. It's a company where one of the employees on the sales team was just playing video games at his desk all the time. And the manager just kept walking by, kept seeing the employee playing video games, and you'd think that the manager would say something, or that the manager would do something, and the manager did nothing, and I'll tell you exactly why. Because that was one of the best salespeople on the team.
Right.
And so this manager was smart enough to know whatever this guy is doing, he's making legitimate sales. They're not getting returned. People are buying the product, and he's one of the leading salespeople on the team. If sitting in his office playing video games all day is actually getting those results, I am not complaining.
Absolutely. Actually, everyone should play video games right now.
But something along those lines is like, if that actually makes you successful and genuinely successful, then leave that. And I'll tell you what's funny is that a lot of managers would make the mistake of saying, well, if he weren't playing video games all day, he'd spend more time selling. He'd be an even better salesperson. That's just not true. The biggest thing with the knowledge era now is that we need to redefine our concept of productivity. Most people are thinking on an industrial era model, which is that the longer we spend doing our tasks, the more we'll get done. And that is true when the task is algorithmic, when you're sort of following a recipe and you know exactly what you need to do. Then it's more, sort of like production line. When you're producing things on a line, the more time you spend on it, generally, the more you're going to put through. But when it comes to things that are more creative, heuristic tasks, ideas, generating ideas, coming up with solutions, solving problems, things that require a bit of insight, a bit of extrapolation or application of experience, the more time you spend on the problem, is not necessarily going to do you something better. And something like sales, where, you know, what you're trying to do is connect with people, understand their needs, help them to recognize how the product fulfills their needs. That's often not an algorithmic task. It's not like, you know, the more calls you make, the more likely you are to sell. It's the more quality calls you make, the more likely you are to sell. And for this guy, for whatever reason, playing the video games kept his quality up. And so, you know, what's funny is that this guy was only making 7 calls a day and closing 7 sales. And that's, let's assume that that's a lot for that group. I don't actually know. But if you've got that happening, and whereas everybody else is making 200 calls a day and making, you know, 5 sales a day, you have to wonder, like, well, what's happening here? But certainly you don't want to fire the guy who's making 7 calls and getting 7 hits. But most managers will say, if he makes 7 calls and he gets 7 hits, then if he makes 200 calls, he's going to get 200 hits. And that's just ridiculous.
Damn it, Orin. I'm so agreeing with what you say. You know, you know, when you were speaking, I was smiling because this message, or what you just mentioned, everything, the principle, the process, you know what you want to implement in order to make this work. I so much believe in that, you know. But how can we change the companies, Orin? Tell me, you know, how can we change that? Because do we need a revolution? What does need to happen? Because almost everyone feels that something needs to change now, and it's not happening. So please tell me, what is the solution?
So one of the things that we can actually learn a lot from is a company called SAS. They're actually a very good company, and part of it is they're privately owned. So we can learn a lot from them, and funnily enough, I spent a lot of time in graduate school studying that company because they were doing a lot of the right stuff. But even when you study companies like SAS, Southwest, and so on, you have to recognize you're not that company. So again, reverse engineer what you learn. But the number one thing for the cultural revolution that we need is the ability of people to stand up to the people demanding and say, hold your horses, wait. We need to redevelop some things, and we need to wait. And this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is what we believe that the results will be in X amount of time. And there are companies, we can cite companies like Zappos, companies like SAS, companies like Southwest, that once they've been able to create cultures like this sustainably, they have been exceptionally profitable. Consequently, we're trying to create that same change, and it's not going to happen quickly. And our investors, our stakeholders, they need to understand that as we're undergoing this process, which can take months, possibly even years, that we're going to profit a little bit less temporarily, so that we can create a sustainable company that's getting sustainable profit. And sustainable, I'm not just talking about environmentally sustainable. No. I'm talking about the kind of profit that we can make consistently because we've got the right values, because we've got the right value proposition, because we're actually connected to our employees in terms of value. Patagonia would be another company to look at there. They've got a very good connection with their companies. And actually, one of my favorite companies, which I find is not very often studied, but LL Bean, another really, really good company that I actually love dealing with. And I found that almost everybody who deals with LL Bean is very satisfied with that company. It's quite amazing. I would say that part of the reason we don't necessarily study LL Bean is because they don't have stratospheric levels of profit every single year, but from what I can tell, they're a pretty solid company. So people need to, the number one thing people need to say is wait, take your time, be patient. We cannot necessarily provide instant revolutions, instant results. It's a long-term process getting to that mindset. But also, we have to remember that we're also breaking habits. We need to get out of the the industrial revolution mindset, where we're thinking about productivity in terms of hours worked or rear end in chair, And we see this, by the way, even in education. I'm a college professor. I see this in education. People with this silly impression that if you put your rear end in the chair while the professor's flapping his gums, that you've actually taken the course. And, like I said, if we're seeing this in education, we're seeing this as early as college, why are we surprised that these college graduates are getting credentials and then becoming, people in companies where there's this notion that nominally having it appear that you've done something is sufficient? To make the change, we've got to start looking at whether you got the real thing or not.
Right.
And some of that is trust, and that is admittedly a leap of faith. And a leap of faith, trusts are leaps of faith. We want to try and make them small at first, take little leaps of faith, little bits, try this with one department. But you also have to remember that even when you're trying this with one department, you have to then shield that one department from the culture of the rest of the company that isn't trying this yet. And you've got to create that insulation, and that's extra effort for what is often overburdened management.
Right.
And what you see also is, again, this overburden that people are constantly being asked to do so much. As a matter of fact, if I would bet, and I'm not going to ask you to admit to this because, you are writing a podcast here, but I would bet, and I'd probably take your money, that if I asked you how much your on-the-job stress has increased over the last 3 years, I'm going to guess, yeah, there you go, and how much, and the workload that you have been expected to accomplish in nominally the same amount of time, which is not even reasonable or possible. And I mean, it's not just you, this is happening everywhere, that people are getting increased stress and so on. And what's hilarious is you can often alleviate this stress and, funnily enough, increase employment in very simple ways. I mean, imagine if I'm going to use United States salary numbers because I just don't know the French numbers on this, but I would say, for example, that imagine that you've got, all these overworked people in a company, but I would bet you that a lot of the work that you have to do really could be done by a trained monkey. I mean, somebody who just finished college, and we have people that have just finished college, they have not gotten jobs, and there's so much that people were doing that could be done by a trained monkey or just a new college graduate. So I'll tell you what, Olivier, how about if I took you and maybe 2 or 3 other employees, and I also gave you, I mean, let's assume you're an American company, whatever it is, and I hired somebody $35,000 a year, so somebody fresh out of college, give them an entry-level job, $35,000 a year, or some kind of reasonable salary relative to the city. So it's a livable wage. It's not a lot, but it's a livable wage. And what they're basically doing is taking things off your plate. That's their job.
Right.
You and maybe a couple of other people. And if you think about how much of your time then gets to be used toward things that only you can do at your higher level, I mean, just think about what a cost savings that is. But what I have to point out is that's a long-term cost savings.
Right.
Because over 4 years, you're going to spend $140,000 in this person's salary. There's also the ramp up, the training, the benefits, and that's some lost productivity out of you. So the return on investment is going to come in the long term. And that's going to be a long-term investment. And I can't even tell you exactly how much investment that's going to be, because what's funny is it's hard to quantify anybody's expertise. So how much of your time would be saved? Let's say hypothetically that this person is putting 10 hours back onto your calendar, and you're going to be using 10 more hours of your expertise. What is each week? What is that worth to the company? I mean, that's a very hard thing to quantify. But if we were to just quantify it by your salary, imagine what 10 hours a week of your salary, or basically 500 hours of your time and your expertise now being applied to the company that are not being used on these simple tasks. And so undergraduates are doing these simple tasks. They're gaining experience in the field, and over time, you're probably even, let's say that you spend, of those 500 hours they free up, let's say that you spend 20 of them mentoring this new employee. So the company gets 480 hours of your expertise added back, plus the 20 hours that you invest in the employee, That makes your company look good, improves the employee, gives your company a reputation for developing employees. That employee may even leave the company. I mean, great if they can keep the talent, but otherwise the employee leaves the company with success in their record. And if somebody leaves your company with a track record of success, funnily enough, that looks good for your company too. Mm-hmm. So when you add this all up, these sorts of things are little ways that we enable people to do and be their best. And this is why I call it self-actualization engineering.
That's cool, man.
You're looking at the mechanics.
That's really cool. But I tell you, when you said how much stress did you get the past 3 years, it's amazing, actually. Because I was discussing with some colleagues of mine, and you can see that, the speed has increased. The demand has increased, the objective has increased, the roles and responsibilities have increased. Everything has increased. It's about more, quicker, and more responsibility for you. And you don't even, as you mentioned, when you said we have to stop or we have to wait, it's almost a revolutionary idea right now, Nobody wants to stop, because we're almost like scared. And what will happen if we stop? We can't stop. We have to deliver. And more, And the other fact, the things that you just described is, it's totally true. Everything, all the tasks that we do, and thanks to method like Lean Six Sigma and process mapping and all these things, it can be done by anyone now. It's almost like you can automatize everything, every jobs, even the jobs that you thought that need some brain powers, not anymore. Not anymore. So what is the future of work, actually? That's a good question, Orin. What's the future for these jobs? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, what I would say about it is that the future of work is going to be the heuristic tasks. The bits of judgment, the bits of creativity, those things that really still need a human touch. And I'll give you one funny example is big data. Everybody talks about big data and how big data is taking over. But everybody forgets what's known as the GIGO rule, or the GIGO rule. G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. Computers can do great things with data analysis, but your data are only as good as the tools that collect it.
Right.
And the design of collection tools is still very necessary for human beings to do. And it's figuring out the right data, figuring out the right connections, but also a matter of, let's say, understanding the relationships between one thing and another. A computer can find a relationship between two things, but that doesn't mean it's a meaningful relationship. It doesn't mean that it's one of the relationships that we need to pay attention to. And in some cases, a computer can find a relationship. It doesn't look like there's anything connected, but when you start getting creative about the possible connections, you start brainstorming what could be these sort of relationships or other hidden variables that are affecting this. That takes a human touch. Things that require artistry, they also require very much a human touch. I mean, if you stop and think about it, there are so many companies that do so much of the same thing. So what's the difference between them? Well, there's the ability to compete on price, but there's also the ability to compete on service. I mean, I mentioned LL Bean and Zappos earlier. Part of what makes those companies different is the artistry with which they handle their customers.
Right.
And that's something that a computer just can't do. A computer can't, chat with you, give you the kind of friendly voice, the sort of authentic, genuine, friendly voice that comes from employees of companies like Zappos and LL Bean that understand that they're providing apparel, that they're providing gear for people to live their lives with. They see the value of their work. And that comes through in their customer service, and you can see that.
Absolutely. No, you're so right on that. This emotional connection that you get, and people that care about you, it's more than service, really. It's about the care behind that, and that comes from people that are happy within the workplace, really. This great workplace, because they're happy to be there, and they have this meaning. They have the meaning of delivering something which is great. Well, this is why they will act like this. But I have a very last question for you, because we are approaching the hour right now, and it's about your professor right now, and you teach the young generation, right? And we talk about the millennials, right? And they have so many books that have been written about what is the difference between Generation X, the millennials, the new generation, the baby boomers, So you are in constant interaction with this young generation, the future, people that will be employed. Can you? What is true? From all what has been said about this young generation, how are they?
I think the number one thing to understand is that they're different, and a lot of the books that have been written about millennials have been written using the lenses of Generation X or baby boomer generation. And the thing is, you can't write about a different group using only your own lens without seeing them from their own lens. So, for example, they say that millennials are lazy. What I point out is, it's not so much that millennials are lazy, is that millennials are not up for tedium. They don't see tedium. They don't understand the role of, let's say, tedious tasks or drilling or repetition or trying to do things that they already know that a computer and a calculator could do. So, for example, one of the biggest struggles I have as faculty is getting my students to do the readings or do the work. And I still remember teaching a statistics course where I told the students on the first day of class, I'm giving you all an if-then statement. The problem sets that I put in the syllabus, that, do the book problems, you have to do these book problems, I'm telling you right now that if you don't do the book problems, you're going to fail the exam. Now, since they weren't getting a grade for these book problems, they were just practice problems that I picked out and said, these are the problems you need to do to make sure that you know what you're doing. And I had a lot of students fail the first exam. And so I gathered them after the exam, all the students who failed, and I said, did any of you do the problem sets like I told you to? Nobody. Not one person who failed the exam actually did the problem sets. And by the way, I'll tell you something funny. I give the full range of grades from A to F. To this day, the lowest grade I have ever given to a student who did all the work I assigned is B-.
Oh, God, man. I should have had you as a professor. Come on.
If you did all the readings and you did all the work and you came to every class and you took all the notes and all those things, the lowest grade I've ever given to somebody who did that was B-.
You're awesome. Cool.
Well, but the problem is, if you don't do all of those things, your grade can be as low as F.
Okay.
And what I see is that millennials will not always do that work, or they won't take me seriously on this. Or, I've had so many students tell me, well, I know you said that, but every professor says that, and I wasn't sure if I should really believe you.
They're testing you, man.
Well, I'll tell you what's even funnier is that particular statistics class I'm telling you about, it happens that one of the students in that class was somebody who had me before. So I called on this student, I said to him, and I said, student, you had me before. Tell them that what I'm saying on the first day is really going to happen and come true. And he goes, oh my God, yes it will. Whatever he says, it's true. And I still got this result of a large number of students failing the exam because they didn't do the problem sets.
Wow.
And this is something different I see with millennials. But I will also say that when millennials find the meaning for what they do, they are unstoppable. They have insane amounts of energy, and they will go to it with a dedication and a drive that I just don't think we've seen out of Generation X especially. These millennials can really go to it, and when they see a cause, they dive in, head first. They really get into it. They have very strong passions and very strong feelings on things, and that matters a lot. And that's part of what drives the millennials as a force. So I think that, growing up in the automated generation, they are more impatient, but I think they've also realized, that there are times when you shouldn't have to be patient, when you shouldn't have to wait, and why are we doing that? So I think part of what millennials are doing is they're calling BS on a lot of the things that we have accepted that we should not have accepted. And to be honest with you, we never like it when that happens. And that's part of what upsets us about the millennials, and part of why they're taking such a bum rap is that, they're calling the older generations out on some of the nonsense that they've done, and we don't like it.
Absolutely. And they're right to say it. We suffered, but we just shut up. And they took, they have the courage to say it, to admit the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you think, actually, it's really my last question. Do you think that this change that we talked about in the organization, do you think that it will come from them? Can they have this ability to change the old ways? And because they have this ability to call out the bullshit, do you think that because of that, it can also impact the organization the way they have been run till now?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure, because unfortunately millennials are still getting nailed by the older generations. But I do think that every generation catalyzes the change. My suspicion is we're going to see more of this in the generation after the millennials. The people that are being born in the mid 2000s, let's say, like born hypothetically after, say, 2005, and the ones that have been born in the last 5 to 10 years, I think they're the ones that are really going to see this, and it's the millennials that are going to catalyze that change going into the future. But some of these millennials are still having to navigate a system that's run by baby boomers and Gen Xers, and they're still going to have to deal with a lot of the BS. But in the process of calling it out, they're still going to have to live within that system.
Jesus Christ, man! You just killed my dream. I wanted this quick revolution to happen, and no, it will take so many years now to happen. Okay.
Well, if you have kids, nieces, or nephews, you can recognize that they're going to have something a lot better. And most importantly, people like you and me and this millennial generation, we may not see it all come to fruition, but what we are going to see is we're going to see the transition, and we're going to be the ones that are helping this world go through the unstable transition phase. And that is an unbelievably important role that we have in that change process. So we've all got to stay with the process and make sure that we're stabilizing that rather transitory state as best as we can. And something I showed again in my TEDx talk, and from just something we know from chemistry, is that transition states are very high energy and very unstable. And our role as let's say annoying or uncomfortable as it is that we're going to have to keep this world stable through that transition state and continue to promote the change forward, because from the transition state, it's often equally positive energetically to go backward or to go forward. And so what we're going to need to do is stabilize this and keep pushing forward. And I think that the millennials are going to be the people that are really doing that for us. They're going to be the pushing forward, and then it's going to be the forward-thinking people of the baby boomer and Gen X generation that are holding the stability and giving the baby boomers giving the millennials the room to move forward and push forward. Wow! I'm so happy. This cannot be the best conclusion of this podcast. It's exactly that, It's perfect, man. It's perfect, Orin. I won't ask you any more questions, because it gives hope for everyone. It gives me a meaning, a purpose, what I should do. I will help the transition. That's cool. Thank you, Orin, to give me hope at least. My pleasure.
So now, thank you for being here, Orin, and I would encourage all our listeners, because we have listeners now, to go to see your TED Talk. It's amazing. It's a short TED Talk, but it's really awesome. I like what you said over there, and really, you don't have any books and things to plug in, man. It's the time. If you want to sell anything, it's now.
So people can go to my website, www.qllab.org, and mostly what I'm selling is my services as a consultant, as a coach. And I'm happy to work with companies and help them develop their culture, their organization, bring positive psychology to their company, and make their workplaces great places to work.
And I would hire you if I was a CEO. Absolutely. You're the man. Absolutely. So thank you, Orin, to be there on the podcast. And actually, I think you're lucky that my course wasn't there, because I think you could have talked about 10 minutes. It takes all the airtime. So yeah, we are lucky that team is not there. Anyway, so take care, Orin, and I speak to you soon.
Thank you, Lydia.
Bye-bye.